Welcome guys, welcome to my kitchen. So we are baking today, it is honey, whole wheat, buttermilk sandwich bread. And so it's a recipe in the Made from Scratch Life. Woo, get the little glare from the lights there. The book. So I'm really excited to share this recipe with you. And funny story about this recipe is I had been making the traditional no-knead bread in 5 minutes a day. I'm sure you guys have seen variations of the recipe. And I was sending my son with his little sandwich and his lunch every day to school, thinking he ate it because it came home and there wasn't his sandwich in it. Lucky for me, one of our lunch ladies that also goes to our church let me know that he had been throwing his sandwich away in the garbage, not eating it. How come you've been throwing your sandwich away? And he's like, Mama, I don't like that bread. And I felt so bad. He didn't want to hurt my feelings, so he wasn't telling me that he wasn't eating his sandwich with his lunch. I'm like, oh, kid, you were probably starving. But isn't that sweet? So I was determined to come up with a homemade bread that would be good for sandwiches, that was easy to slice, didn't crumb all over the place, and that my kids liked. Obviously, he needed to be able to eat it. So we had a rule. He had to tell me if he really didn't like it and he wasn't going to be eating it. And then I also did ask the lunch lady, can you please tell me if he throws this one in the garbage too? So this is how this recipe was born. The recipe calls for 4.5 teaspoons of yeast, and this makes 2 full-size loaves. This is for 2 loaves of bread. You can half it if you only want to bake 1. That's totally fine. And then 1¼ cups warm water and 1/4 cup honey. And these are the first 3 ingredients, and this is what you put in the bowl. So you stir all this together. The honey helps to feed the yeast because it's sugar. And let it sit for between 5 and 10 minutes, and it's going to turn really foamy. So this lets you know that your yeast is active. It's ready to go in raising your bread, and the yeast is still good because yeast can go bad. It can die, and then it won't work very well. So this is so you know before you put all your ingredients in that your yeast is working. So I think that you can see that is bubbly in there. Can you see? I hope the camera is showing that. It's kind of hard up close. So it's kind of bubbly and thick looking. That means your yeast is active and that it is ready to add the rest of your ingredients and to bake. So we've got all of that proofing. So the next ingredients that we want to put in is I've got 6 tablespoons of softened butter here. Yeah, grinding your own flour is great. And I've got I've got a podcast episode that talks about grinding your own flour and the differences in the different kinds of wheat berries and what you want for which specific things you're baking with and tips and tricks. And you can get that at melissanorris.com. Click on the podcast button, and then they're all listed by title, and you can find the one that says tips for baking and grinding your own flour. Yeah, it's a really good one. It's got some good tips because it took me a long time. So here is our 6 tablespoons of melted softened butter anyways. And the next thing that we're adding is buttermilk. And y'all, buttermilk is the best thing in the world for baked goods. Buttermilk is so good because it has acid in it. So buttermilk is a cultured food, which is great, but it also has some acid in it, which lends itself very, very well to baking, makes awesome bread, makes cakes, But not all of us have buttermilk, right? And when we want to bake, we want to bake. We don't want to have to run to the store. So I have got this is our substitution ingredient chart. So 1 cup of buttermilk you can substitute for anything is 1 cup of yogurt. So you can use yogurt in place of buttermilk, or just take 1 cup of regular milk and add a tablespoon of either lemon juice or vinegar, and it will curdle it. And you just let it sit for a couple of minutes. You'll actually see it curdle right on top. And you can use that as a buttermilk substitute, and it works great in any recipe. And I do it all the time. I pour all my liquids in there. We'll get that right there. So we've got our fats and our liquid, and this is a pretty basic recipe. Next, you can add an egg if you want. So when you're baking bread, an egg will make it richer, and it will also make it more of a yellow color, but it's just totally optional. So if you're low on eggs, my hens aren't laying as the best in the wintertime as they normally do, so I'm omitting the egg this time. But if you want like a really nice rich bread, you can throw an egg in there. Next, I'm using 8 cups of my freshly ground flour. So as you can see, this is my canister that goes right on to the grain mill. And I just kind of do a rough, recipes are guidelines, guys. That's the way I go, even with my own. So I just kind of do a rough 8. Now I'm going to add our salt, and this is Himalayan sea salt, pink sea salt, and it's a tablespoon of that. So I put the salt in there. So normally what I do is when I'm using the fresh ground flour is I add my 6 cups. Usually total volume for the recipe of flour is 8 cups, but we put our first 6 cups in first and we start to let that mix. Fresh ground flour actually absorbs more water, more liquid, easier and more than older regular flour from the store. So I mix it up and then I turn off the mixer and I let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes because it's going to finish absorbing the moisture that's in the recipe. And then I can look at it and I can see and say, okay, now I know I need to add 1 more cup flour, or nope, I don't need to add any more flour. Okay, so I'm actually going to add 1 more cup and then I can show you what it looks like when you actually have enough flour incorporated in there. Starting to come up to where we want it. I think it's going to need a little bit more flour, however, so I want to show you, though, the difference between last time and now. You can see that it's starting to climb up the dough hook, so to speak. It's starting to form like a little ball in the center, and that's what we're looking for. We want it to actually come up and kind of form around the dough hook. But I'm going to add another cup or so of flour. So I'm just going to do about a half a cup because I don't want to add too much flour to it. Okay, so you see how it's climbing up the dough hook all the way there? So it's climbed up the dough hook and it's staying up on it. I don't know if you can see that really well. It might be too close. So that is when I'm going to let this sit for about 8 minutes and let the flour finish absorbing the rest of the liquid, and it gives my little kneader there a break. So you can see here it's hanging on to the hook, so that's what we want. I'm going to actually clean that part off. And so I want to show you, it's a little sticky. So I think you can see that. It's a little sticky, but it's not a ton sticky. You know, I can pull my fingers away. So this is about the texture that you want. You want it to hold, but you still, it's kind of tacky, so to speak. And that's what we want at this stage in the dough, especially, like I said, with the whole wheat. So I'm going to sew that there. So I just take, and we're going to let this rise. So it usually is about an hour, and it's going to basically double in size. So sometimes it's 45 minutes, sometimes it's an hour and 15 minutes. It just kind of depends on how warm your kitchen is and how active that. My house is cold, so yeast does not like to get cold. It will not rise as well. So one thing, this is one of the reasons that we covered in a towel. We don't want it to dry out on the top layer that's not against the bowl. And we want to keep it warm. So this helps trap the warmth from the warm water and the warm flour and the melted butter and everything. And I actually put mine in my oven with just the light on. So don't accidentally preheat or turn your oven on. But I put mine in the oven with the light on in the wintertime because that creates a nice little warm environment. And then I don't have to worry about it being too cold and not getting a good rise, because the rise is what gives you the really nice texture, you know, that melt in your mouth part of bread. Oh, love. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I haven't baked bread in a while, guys. So I can't wait to pull it out of the oven. I will be back on here in an hour to show you how to form the rolls. There's a couple different ways that you can form, excuse me, not rolls, loaves. We're making loaves. You could make rolls out of this, but we're making loaves. So I'll show you that part. So just keep an eye out for part 2 of baking the bread at home, guys. So thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you back here shortly.